Have you ever wondered why the smartest thing you have ever said to a narcissist accomplished absolutely nothing, but the dumbest thing you could have done, walking away without a single word of explanation, haunted them for weeks? Have you ever noticed that arguing with a narcissist makes you weaker, but agreeing with them in the right way at the right moment makes them do exactly what you needed them to do without ever realizing they were moved? Have you ever wondered why the person who seems to hold all the power in a dynamic is actually operating from the most fragile position in the room? And why nobody ever shows you how to use that fragility as the exact instrument that takes your power back? If you have been dealing with a narcissist in your workplace, in your family, in a relationship, in any corner of your life where someone's oversized sense of themselves has been making your world smaller, then what you are about to hear in this video is going to change the way you navigate that dynamic permanently, not temporarily, not in theory. In the very next interaction you have with this person. Because everything you have been doing up to this point has been wrong. Not because you are unintelligent, because you have been fighting the ego head-on. And fighting a narcissist's ego head-on is like punching a wall. Your hand breaks, the wall does not move, and the narcissist walks away more convinced than ever that they are unbreakable. Every confrontation, every argument, every time you laid out the evidence and made the case and proved beyond any reasonable doubt that they were wrong, every single one of those moments fed the thing you were trying to defeat. Because the narcissist's ego does not run on being right. It runs on being the center. And every time you fought it, you put it at the center of your attention, your emotion, and your energy. You gave it exactly what it needed to survive. My friend, that stops today. Machiavelli understood something about ego-driven opponents that took him years of working in the most ego-saturated environments in the history of Western civilization to fully document. He sat across the table from popes and princes and military commanders whose egos were so vast that entire political systems bent around them. And he discovered something that nobody talks about clearly enough. The ego is not just the narcissist's weapon. It is their blind spot. It is the gap in the armor that they cannot see because the armor itself is built to prevent them from looking at it. And the person who understands how to use that blind spot, gently, precisely, without the narcissist ever recognizing what is happening, is the person who wins every exchange without ever appearing to compete. Let me tell you what this means in the plainest possible terms, because the simplicity of it is what makes it so powerful. The narcissist's ego needs certain things to function. It needs admiration. It needs the feeling of control. It needs to believe it is the smartest, the most important, the most central thing in any room it occupies. These needs are not optional for the narcissist. They are the psychological infrastructure that holds the whole personality together. Without them, the narcissist experiences something that feels to them like annihilation, not discomfort. Annihilation. That is why they fight so hard. That is why every confrontation feels like a battle for survival. Because for them, it is. And here is the part that changes everything for you. Those needs, the specific, predictable, consistent needs that the ego cannot function without, are the exact points where the ego can be directed. Not destroyed, not defeated. Directed. The way a river is directed by the shape of the banks. The water does not know it is being guided. It simply flows where the terrain allows it to flow, and the person who shapes the terrain shapes where the water goes. 7 tricks. Each one grounded in what Machiavelli observed about ego-driven behavior and confirmed by what modern psychology understands about narcissistic personality structure. By the end of this video, you will have something that most people dealing with a narcissist never get. The ability to navigate the dynamic on your terms rather than on theirs. using the very thing they believe makes them invincible as the precise instrument of their undoing. If you are ready to stop losing to someone whose only real advantage is that they understand their own game better than you do, comment the words, "I use the ego now." Like this video, because every like puts it in front of someone who is still fighting the wall with their bare hands. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. And drop your location and the time. This community is real, and the person watching next needs to know they are not alone in this. Trick 1. Feed the ego what it expects. Then redirect the energy it produces toward the outcome you actually want. Let me tell you why this works before I tell you how to do it, because understanding the why is what makes the how feel natural instead of manipulative. A narcissist's ego is a machine. It takes in a specific kind of fuel: admiration, attention, confirmation of superiority, and it produces a specific kind of output: cooperation, warmth, temporary pleasantness, the brief window where the narcissist is in a generous enough mood to be workable. Most people try to get that cooperation by fighting for it, by making a case, by proving they deserve it, by earning it through the logical presentation of evidence. And it never works, because the ego does not respond to logic. It responds to supply. Give it what it wants, and the machinery produces the output you need. Withhold it, and the machinery shuts down or turns hostile. That is not a moral judgment. That is how the system operates. Machiavelli observed this with a clarity that came from direct experience of the most ego-driven leaders in Renaissance Europe. He documented that the advisors who had the most influence over narcissistic rulers were never the ones who challenged them directly. They were the ones who had learned to present their own agenda in a way that the ruler experienced as his own idea. The ruler felt brilliant. The advisor got the outcome. Both parties walked away from the interaction satisfied, one with the feeling of having been right, the other with the reality of having shaped the decision. The advisor understood something the ruler never saw, that the need to feel brilliant was itself the lever. And the lever, once understood, could be operated with precision and consistency. Here is how you do this in your actual life. The next time you need something from the narcissist in your world, a decision, a concession, a change in behavior, a moment of cooperation, do not present it as your idea. Present it as the natural extension of something they already believe about themselves. If they see themselves as intelligent, frame your need as the smart move. If they see themselves as generous, frame it as the generous thing to do. If they see themselves as a leader, frame it as what a leader would do in this situation. You are not lying. You are speaking the language the ego understands. And the ego, spoken to in its own language, produces cooperation that no amount of argument could ever extract. Let me give you a specific example that will make this immediately usable. You need the narcissist in your life to agree to a schedule change that benefits you. A direct request would be heard as you asking them to accommodate you, which the ego reads as subordination, which produces resistance. Instead, you frame it this way. You know, I was thinking about how you mentioned wanting things to run more efficiently around here, and I realized there is a way to adjust the schedule that would actually demonstrate the kind of optimization you have been talking about. Now, the schedule change is not your need being accommodated. It is their vision being implemented. The ego does not just accept it, it champions it, because the ego now owns it. And what the ego owns, the ego defends. You did not fight for the change. You installed it inside the thing the narcissist was already defending, their own self-image. If this already shifted something, comment I speak the ego's language. Trick 2. Ask for their advice. The ego cannot resist performing expertise, and the performance puts them exactly where you need them. Before I get into this one, Let me tell you why it is so effective that you will want to use it in every significant interaction you have with a narcissist from this point forward. The narcissist's ego has a specific and exploitable need, the need to feel like the smartest person in any exchange, not the most liked, not the most trusted, the smartest, the most knowledgeable, the one whose understanding of the situation exceeds everyone else's. That need is so powerful and so consistent that it overrides almost every other consideration in the narcissist's decision-making process. And asking for advice activates it directly. When you ask a narcissist for advice, genuinely, warmly, with the specific quality of deference that the ego requires, something happens in their psychology that works entirely in your favor. The request for advice positions them as the expert. It puts them in a teaching frame rather than a competing frame. And a narcissist in a teaching frame is a cooperative narcissist. Because teaching requires giving. It requires sharing. It requires the narcissist to orient their energy toward helping you rather than managing you. And that orientation, which would never have been produced by a direct request for help, happens automatically when the request arrives in the form of advice-seeking. Machiavelli documented this technique in his descriptions of how successful diplomats handled rulers whose egos made direct negotiation impossible. He observed that the diplomat who said, "I need you to do this," was invariably met with resistance. The diplomat who said, "I am facing a difficult situation and I value your perspective on it," was met with engagement. The content of the conversation was identical. The framing was different, and the framing determined the outcome. Here is something deeper about why this works that goes beyond the immediate interaction. When a narcissist gives you advice, they are not just talking, they are investing. Every word of advice is a piece of themselves that they have placed into the conversation. And once they have invested, once they have committed their expertise, their identity, their ego to a particular position, they become psychologically committed to seeing that position succeed. Because if their advice fails, that is a failure of their expertise, and the ego cannot tolerate that. So the narcissist who has given you advice will now actively support the direction that advice pointed toward, not because they care about your success, because your success is now their success. The advice made it so. You did not ask them to champion your cause. You asked them to advise you. And the advising made them a champion automatically because the ego cannot let its own counsel be proven wrong. Here is a specific example that will make this immediately usable. You need the narcissist in your workplace to support a particular direction. A direct request would trigger resistance because the ego experiences direct requests as subordination. Instead, you approach them with a genuine seeming question about the broader situation. You say something like, "You have more experience with this kind of situation than anyone here, and I am trying to figure out the best approach. What would you do?" The narcissist lights up. The expertise engine fires. They begin telling you what they would do. And as they talk, they begin investing in the direction, not because you asked them to, but because they are now generating it themselves. By the time the conversation ends, the narcissist believes the approach was their idea. And an idea the narcissist believes is theirs is an idea the narcissist will defend with the full weight of the ego that produced it. Let me be clear about something here. This is not manipulation in the way that the narcissist manipulates you. This is navigation. You are not creating a false reality. You are using the real architecture of the narcissist's psychology to produce an outcome that serves both of you. The narcissist gets to feel brilliant. You get the outcome you needed. Machiavelli would have called this virtue, the intelligent reading of a situation and the precise application of the approach that the situation actually requires, rather than the approach that principle says it should require. Comment "I ask" instead of argue if you just saw your next interaction with a narcissist differently than you saw it 5 minutes ago. Trick 3. Give them the illusion of control while you control the options available. My friend, this is the trick that works at the deepest level because it operates entirely inside the narcissist's blind spot. The narcissist needs to feel in control. That need is not a preference. It is a structural requirement of their psychological architecture. Without the feeling of control, the narcissist experiences anxiety that their ego is not equipped to process, and that anxiety produces the unpredictable, aggressive, and destabilizing behavior that makes living and working alongside a narcissist so exhausting. The control is not actually about controlling you. It is about controlling the narcissist's own internal state. They need to feel that they are the one making the decisions, shaping the direction, determining what happens next. And the moment that feeling is threatened, the ego activates its defense system, which is everything you have been dealing with that brought you to this video. So, here is what you do. You stop fighting for control and start managing the options. Instead of presenting one thing and arguing for it, which the narcissist's ego will resist because accepting your recommendation means ceding the decision to you, you present 2 or 3 options, all of which serve your interest, all of which produce an outcome that works for you. And you let the narcissist choose between them. The choosing is the control. The feeling of having selected the direction is the supply the ego needs. And the outcome, whichever option they choose, is the outcome you were building toward from the beginning. Machiavelli documented this approach in his descriptions of how effective political operators managed rulers who could not be directly instructed. He observed that the advisor who presented a single recommendation was overruled more often than not, because the act of overruling produced the feeling of authority that the ruler's ego required. The advisor who presented multiple options, each of which served the underlying objective, was effectively allowing the ruler to exercise the control the ego demanded, while ensuring that the exercise of that control produced a favorable outcome regardless of which direction the choice went. The ruler felt powerful. The advisor got the result. The dynamic functioned. Let me give you a specific example that will make this immediately usable. You need a narcissistic manager to approve a project direction. You know which direction is best. Your instinct is to present it and argue for it. That instinct will get you a rejection because the ego needs to be the one deciding, not the one agreeing. Instead, you present 3 options. Option A is the direction you actually want. Option B is a direction that is acceptable but less ideal. Option C is a direction that is clearly the weakest, but provides the contrast that makes the other 2 look strong. The narcissist reviews. The narcissist deliberates. The narcissist chooses, probably A or B, both of which serve your interest. The narcissist feels like the decision maker. You got what you needed. The ego was used as the delivery mechanism rather than fought as the obstacle. If this is landing, comment "I control the options." Here is the deeper principle underneath this trick. The narcissist's need for control is not a character flaw you are exploiting. It is a psychological need that, when unmet, produces the destructive behavior that has been making your life difficult. By giving the ego the experience of control in a form that serves you, you are reducing the explosive, manipulative, destabilizing behavior that unmet control needs produce. You are managing the conditions that determine whether the narcissist's behavior is workable or destructive. And managing conditions is what intelligent people do in environments they cannot fully control. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. It is exactly how the most effective people in history managed the volatile personalities around them, not by confronting the volatility, but by managing the inputs that produced it. That distinction between confronting a problem and managing the conditions that create it is the entire difference between the person who keeps losing to the narcissist and the person who starts winning without the narcissist ever knowing the game changed. Trick 4. Use public praise to lock the narcissist into the behavior you need from them. Before I continue, let me say something important about why this trick requires a specific kind of emotional discipline that most people dealing with a narcissist do not initially have. The idea of praising someone who has been hurting you, draining you, and making your life smaller feels wrong. It feels like rewarding bad behavior. It feels like letting them win. And I understand that feeling completely. But I need you to hear this. The praise is not the reward. The praise is the lock. And understanding the difference between those two things is what separates the person who keeps losing to the narcissist from the person who starts winning without the narcissist ever realizing the game has changed. Here is how it works. A narcissist's ego is driven by public image. What they look like to other people matters to them more than almost anything else. More than accuracy, more than fairness, more than the actual quality of the decision they are making. The image is the priority. And when you publicly praise a narcissist for a specific behavior, when you say in front of other people something that acknowledges a particular action they took, you have done something that the ego cannot undo. You have linked their public image to that behavior. And now the narcissist has to keep performing that behavior in order to maintain the image that the praise constructed. They are locked in, not by your demand, by their own need to be seen the way you just described them. Machiavelli observed this in the courts of Florence with particular interest. He documented that the most effective way to shape the behavior of an ego-driven ruler was not to criticize the behavior you wanted to change. Criticism produced defensiveness and retaliation, but to praise the behavior you wanted to encourage. Praise, delivered publicly and specifically, created a standard that the ruler's own ego then demanded they maintain. The praise was not flattery, it was architecture. It was the construction of a public expectation that the ego would enforce internally without any further intervention required. Let me give you a real-world example. The narcissist in your life does something that is actually fair and reasonable. It happens occasionally, and when it does, most people let it pass without comment because they are so accustomed to the unfair behavior that the fair behavior seems like an anomaly not worth acknowledging. That is a mistake. The next time the narcissist does something fair, acknowledge it publicly, not excessively. Not in a way that feels sycophantic, specifically and genuinely. Something like, I appreciated how you handled that situation. It showed real fairness, and I think everyone in the room noticed it. You have now tied their public image to fairness. And the ego, which is running a continuous calculation of how to maintain and enhance its public image, will now factor fairness into that calculation. Not because they suddenly developed a moral commitment to fairness, because you linked fairness to their image, and their image is the thing they will protect above everything else. Right now, midway through this video, I want to say something directly to you. What you are learning here is not theory. Every single one of these tricks can be applied in your next interaction with the narcissist in your life. You do not need to wait for the right moment or the right circumstances. The next conversation is the right moment. And if this channel is giving you the tools to navigate something that has been draining you for longer than you want to admit, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell. Because the next 3 tricks go deeper than the first 4, and you need all 7 to operate the full system. Comment, I praise what I want to see more of if this just reframed how you think about the narcissist's ego. Trick 5. Present your boundaries as protection of their image, and the ego will defend your boundary for you. My friend, this is the trick that will feel the most counterintuitive and produce the most immediately visible results. Because what I am about to tell you solves the single biggest problem that every person dealing with a narcissist faces: how to set a boundary with someone who experiences every boundary as a personal attack. Here is the problem. When you set a boundary with a narcissist directly: I need you to stop doing this, I will not accept this behavior, this is my limit. The ego does not hear a boundary. The ego hears a challenge. It hears someone saying, I have the authority to tell you what to do. And the ego will fight that authority with everything it has. Not because the boundary is unreasonable, because the existence of the boundary implies that someone other than the narcissist has the power to define the terms of the interaction. And that implication is intolerable to the ego. So the boundary gets tested, pushed, violated, or reframed as your problem, rather than their behavior. Now, here is what changes everything. Instead of presenting the boundary as your need, present it as protection of their image. Instead of saying, I need you to stop doing this, say something like, I want to make sure this situation does not put you in a position that could be misread by the people around us. The narcissist's ego hears something completely different now. It does not hear a challenge to its authority. It hears a concern about its image. And the ego will respond to threats to its image faster and more aggressively than it responds to any other kind of information. You have just recruited the narcissist's own psychological defense system to enforce your boundary for you. The ego that was going to fight the boundary is now defending it, because the boundary has been reframed as the thing that protects the image, and the image is sacred. Machiavelli observed a version of this in how the most skilled diplomats handled ego-driven rulers whose behavior was becoming a liability. He documented that the diplomat who told the ruler your behavior is wrong was dismissed or punished. The diplomat who told the ruler your behavior is being misread by the people around you, and that misreading could damage your standing, produced immediate behavioral change. The content was identical. The framing was different. And the framing determined whether the ruler heard a criticism to be rejected or a threat to be addressed. The ego, spoken to in the language of image protection, cooperates. Spoken to in the language of behavioral correction, it fights. Same ego, same behavior being addressed. Completely different outcome based entirely on which door you knock on. Let me give you a specific scenario you can use this week. The narcissist in your life has a habit of making dismissive comments in front of other people. Direct confrontation has not worked. It has produced defensiveness, denial, and escalation. So you try this instead. You approach the narcissist privately and say something like, I have noticed that some of the comments in group settings might be landing differently than you intend. I would not want anyone to get the wrong impression of you, because I know that is not who you are. Watch what happens. The ego does not hear a criticism. It hears a warning about its image, and it will adjust. Not because it suddenly cares about your feelings, because it cares about how it looks. And you have just made the adjustment serve its primary concern. Let me tell you why this trick, more than any other in this video, has the potential to change your daily experience immediately. Every person dealing with a narcissist has at least one boundary that they have tried to set and failed. One thing they have asked for: respectful communication, consistent follow-through, the absence of dismissive behavior in front of others, that the narcissist has acknowledged and then violated, sometimes within the same conversation. The failure is not because the boundary was unreasonable. The failure is because the boundary was presented as a constraint on the narcissist's behavior, and the ego does not accept external constraints. It is structurally incapable of receiving the message you need to stop doing this without converting it into someone is trying to control me, which activates the defensive response that undoes everything the boundary was trying to accomplish. But the same ego that cannot accept a behavioral constraint will aggressively enforce anything it perceives as image protection. The ego protects its public image with more consistency and more intensity than it protects anything else in the narcissist's life. And a boundary that is framed as image protection gets the full weight of that defense system working in your favor rather than against you. That is not manipulation. That is alignment. You are aligning your need with the ego's highest priority. And when those two things are aligned, the dynamic produces cooperation instead of conflict. For the first time. Comment: I use the ego's priorities as my protection. If you just realized that the boundary you could never get the narcissist to respect can be reframed as the thing the narcissist's own ego demands. Trick 6. Let them win the argument, then win the outcome. Let me tell you something that took me a long time to understand, and that I wish someone had told me clearly a long time before I figured it out on my own. The argument and the outcome are not the same thing. In a dynamic with a narcissist, the argument is what the ego needs. The outcome is what you need. And the person who understands this distinction stops wasting energy on the thing that does not matter and starts investing it in the thing that does. The narcissist needs to win the argument. That is non-negotiable. The ego requires it. The ego requires the experience of having been right, of having prevailed, of having demonstrated superiority in the contested exchange. And every ounce of energy you spend trying to win the argument against a narcissist is energy that the ego absorbs and converts into fuel. You cannot win the argument because the argument is the narcissist's territory. It is the arena they have been training in their entire lives. They are better at it than you are. Not because they are more intelligent. Because they are more committed to winning it. Because winning it is not a preference for them. It is a survival mechanism. You are fighting over a position. They are fighting for their psychological existence. The stakes are not equal, and the outcomes reflect that. Machiavelli understood this about contested dynamics with a clarity that most people arrive at only after years of losing. He observed that the advisors who achieved the most with ego-driven rulers were the ones who lost every argument and won every outcome. They conceded the verbal exchange. They let the ruler feel the satisfaction of having been right. And then, in the quiet aftermath of the ruler's victory, they shaped the actual decision, the actual implementation, the actual direction of events in the way that served their objectives. The ruler had the feeling, the advisor had the result. And the result is the thing that actually changes your life. Here is what this looks like in practice. You are in a disagreement with the narcissist about how to handle a situation. You know your approach is better. Your instinct is to prove it, to lay out the evidence, to win the argument. Instead, you do this. You concede the argument gracefully. You say something like, "You know what, you might be right about this. I had not thought about it that way." The narcissist's ego gets its supply. The tension drops. And then, in the implementation, in the actual execution of whatever was decided, you quietly steer toward the outcome you were building toward all along. The adjustment is small enough that the narcissist does not notice it as a deviation from their position. But it is significant enough that the result, when it arrives, looks much more like what you wanted than what they argued for. They won the argument. You won the outcome. And winning the outcome is the only kind of winning that changes anything real. Let me tell you something personal about this one, because it is the trick that costs the most pride to execute and produces the most tangible results. Conceding an argument to a narcissist feels like losing. It feels like surrender. It feels like the thing your entire self-respect is organized against doing. And I understand that. I understand the specific flavor of frustration that comes from knowing you are right and choosing not to prove it. But here is what I need you to hold alongside that frustration. The argument is the narcissist's arena. You did not build it. You did not design the rules. You did not choose to compete in it. The narcissist constructed this arena specifically because it is the one they always win in. And every time you step into it, every time you accept the invitation to compete on terrain that was built for their advantage, you are playing their game by their rules on their field. The outcome is predetermined, not by the quality of your argument, by the structure of the exchange. The outcome is a different arena. It is the arena where decisions become actions, and actions become results, and results become the reality that both of you have to live with. In that arena, the person who shapes the implementation shapes the future. And the narcissist, who is still savoring the victory of the argument, is not paying attention to the implementation. Because the argument was the point for them. The implementation is where the real point lives for you. Let them have the argument, take the outcome. And notice, over time, how the gap between what the narcissist thinks happened and what actually happened starts widening in your favor. That gap is the space where your real influence lives. Comment "I win" where it matters if this just shifted how you see the next disagreement you are going to have with the narcissist in your life. Trick 7. Walk away without explanation. The ego cannot survive the mystery of an unexplained departure. This is the last trick, and it is the most powerful one in this entire video. Every other trick has been about navigating the dynamic. This one is about ending it. And the ending, when it is done correctly, does something to the narcissist that nothing else in this video can do. It takes away the one thing the ego needs more than admiration, more than control, more than the feeling of being right. It takes away the narrative. Let me explain what I mean by that. A narcissist lives inside a story about themselves. Every relationship they have, every interaction they are part of, every dynamic they participate in is organized around a narrative in which they are the central character. When a relationship ends because of a fight, the narcissist has a narrative. They were wronged, or they were misunderstood, or the other person was too weak or too stupid to handle them. When a relationship ends because of an explanation, because the departing person laid out their reasons clearly and thoroughly, the narcissist has even more narrative material. The explanation gives the ego something to work with, something to reframe, something to dismiss, something to convert into a story that preserves the narcissist's self-image intact. But when someone walks away without a word, when there is no fight, no explanation, no final conversation, no closing statement, when there is just absence, sudden, complete, and entirely without commentary, the narcissist has nothing. The ego, which requires a story in order to metabolize any experience, has no story to tell. The departure cannot be dismissed because there is nothing to dismiss. The reasons cannot be reframed because no reasons were given. The other person cannot be cast as the villain because the other person did not do anything that the story can use. They simply left. And the leaving, without the why, becomes the one thing the narcissist's ego cannot process. It becomes an open loop that the ego cannot close. And an open loop in a narcissist's mind produces a kind of persistent, low-grade discomfort that no closure can relieve because the closure was never provided. Machiavelli observed something similar in the political dynamics of withdrawal. He documented that the opponents who were most difficult for ego-driven rulers to process were not the ones who fought the hardest. They were the ones who disappeared without making noise. The ruler who was challenged openly had something to react to. And the reaction, however hostile, was also a form of processing that allowed the ego to move forward. The ruler who was simply abandoned, whose ally or advisor or subject simply stopped engaging without explanation, was left in a psychological space that the ego found deeply unsettling. Because the ego needs to be the center of the story. And a departure without explanation removes the ego from the narrative entirely. The departing person has walked away with the only thing the ego cannot manufacture on its own, the reason. My friend, if you are at the point where the tricks in this video are not about managing the dynamic, but about leaving it, this is the one that will serve you most completely. Walk away without the speech, without the letter, without the final conversation where you lay out everything they did and everything you felt and everything you need them to understand. That conversation is for you, not for them. And if you need to have it with a friend, a therapist, a piece of paper that you write on and never send. But do not give it to the narcissist, because the explanation is the last gift you can give the ego. And the gift you give by withholding it, the gift of permanent mystery, of a departure that can never be fully processed because the information needed to process it was never provided, is the one thing that stays with a narcissist long after every argument has been forgotten and every confrontation has been rewritten in their favor. Let me say one more thing about this trick, because it is the one that requires the most from you emotionally, and I do not want you to underestimate what that emotional cost feels like in the moment. Walking away without explanation means walking away with the words still inside you. It means carrying the unsaid things, the things you wanted them to understand, the things you wanted to make them feel, the truth you wanted to deliver like a verdict, and choosing not to deliver them. That carrying is heavy. It is the specific weight of restraint in a moment when everything inside you is screaming for the release that the final speech would provide. But here is what I need you to know. The release that the speech provides is temporary. The power that the silence provides is permanent. The speech gives you 10 minutes of relief and gives the narcissist a lifetime of material. The silence gives you nothing in the moment and gives you everything in the long run. Because the departure without explanation becomes the thing the narcissist cannot metabolize, cannot reframe, cannot dismiss, cannot convert into the story that preserves their self-image intact. And a narcissist whose self-image has been disrupted by something they cannot process is a narcissist who, for the first time, has to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. And that discomfort, my friend, is the closest thing to genuine reflection that a narcissist's ego will ever allow. You gave them that by giving them nothing, and that nothing is worth more than every word you chose not to say. Comment I leave without giving them the story if you understand now why silence is not weakness. It is the most complete form of power available to you when you are ready to walk. Every one of these 7 tricks operates on the same fundamental insight that Machiavelli spent his career trying to make visible. The narcissist's ego is not their strength. It is their operating system. And operating systems, once they are understood, can be navigated with the same kind of precision that the narcissist has been using to navigate you. Not to harm them, not to become what they are, to stop being moved by what they do, to start choosing your responses rather than having your responses chosen for you by the emotional machinery that the ego has been activating inside you every time it does what it does. You are not the same person who started this video. Something has shifted, not just in what you know, in how you see the dynamic you have been living inside. The narcissist in your life looks different now, not less powerful, less mysterious, and mystery was the only thing that was making the power work. Once you see the mechanism, once you understand that the ego is the blind spot, and the image is the pressure point, and the need for control is the lever you have been looking for, the whole dynamic changes. Not because the narcissist changed, because you did. And you changing is the one thing their ego never accounted for. Let me leave you with this. Every interaction you have from this point forward with the narcissist in your life is an opportunity to practice one of these 7 tricks. Not all 7 at once. 1. Pick the one that felt most immediately applicable to your specific situation and use it in your next significant interaction. Just one. See what happens. Notice how the dynamic shifts when you stop fighting the ego and start working with it. Notice how the narcissist responds differently when their needs are being met in a form that serves you rather than being blocked in a form that triggers their defense system. And notice, most importantly, how you feel after the interaction. Because if these tricks are working the way they are designed to work, you will walk away from the next conversation feeling something you have not felt in a long time in your interactions with this person. You will feel like yourself, not the version of yourself that the narcissist's behavior has been producing. Reactive, frustrated, diminished, confused. The version of yourself that was there before the narcissist entered your life, and that has been waiting this whole time for the tools to come back. Like this video, if any of these 7 tricks showed you something about the narcissist in your life that you did not see before today, share it with someone you know who is still fighting the ego head-on and losing. They need this more than they know. And subscribe to this channel, because the next video goes even deeper into the specific phrases and verbal moves that make each of these 7 tricks work in real-time conversation. The exact words that the narcissist's ego cannot resist responding to.